afternoon, fellow Toastmasters, honored guests. Pleasure to be with you. I'm going to speak for 5 or 6 minutes on the horror of hierarchy. And in order to do that, I'm going to invite you to join me in a familiar space. At least it's a space that's familiar to me, and I imagine it is to many of you. This is the cabin of an airliner. And it could be any airliner, but let's say that it's a 737. That's the aircraft flown most throughout the world today. So I invite you in, make yourself comfortable, stow your bags, grab a pillow, and settle in for our flight from London to Belfast on this January night in 1989. Now, I can see from your demeanor it's been a long day of nonstop meetings, and shortly after takeoff, you recline the seat and you're asleep. The aircraft climbs briskly through the winter air, and suddenly, an intense pounding reverberates through the entire airplane. Everything vibrates, and smoke begins seeping out of the overhead panels. Now, obviously, you're awake. You look out the window to your left, and you're terror-stricken at the sight of smoke and flame pouring out of the left engine. Now, at the same time you have this realization, obviously the cockpit crew is aware, and they determine instinctively that they have a serious engine malfunction. The captain, Kevin Hunt, disconnects the autopilot, takes control of the aircraft, and says to the co-pilot, "Which engine is it?" The co-pilot, David McClelland, looks at the instruments and says, "It's the right." And with that, the crew shuts down the right engine. They reduce power on the left and commence an emergency descent. As they descend into the East Midland Airport in England, the captain gets around to calling the purser in the back, and he asks, "Do you smell smoke?" And the purser answers, "Yes, we smell smoke." And notice that there was no other exchange of information. The captain didn't ask for more information, and nor was the purser able to provide more information. In the same way that the co-pilot wasn't able to say, "Stop, let me look at this for a moment," he had to give the captain an answer, just as the purser did. They descended for more than 10 minutes with the left engine burning and the good right engine shut down. Now you can imagine what happened. When they maneuvered for approach, attempted to add power on the left engine, they got no response. The aircraft crashed. 47 people died. Thankfully, you did not. Now, this is a terrible example of the impediments of a hierarchical team. They weren't able to transmit the information up, nor was the captain using his team to get more information. And you can see what it led to. Now, this hierarchical boundary that we have is not unique to aviation. We're seeing right now on center stage in the media the play of a hierarchical circumstance at Toyota. The February 11th edition of The Economist magazine made the point that it was the hierarchy in that company that kept the information from reaching the level at which some changes could be made in order to deal with the accelerator problems that they were having with their cars. So again, it was that vertical hierarchy that provided the horror of the things that have happened. Now, I can't speak for other industries particularly, but I can for aviation. And the way that we combat the hierarchy is to really develop our teams. And as a captain, it was my responsibility to brief the crew every time that we flew. on every leg. So we would gather and discuss what the expectations were to be. There would be the pilots, the flight attendants, and any other crew member who might be riding in the cockpit who would also become a member of our team. And I would explicitly say to the flight attendants, you are my eyes and ears in the back of the airplane. If you recognize that there's a problem, come to me. Tell me what that problem is. Even if you're not certain, come and tell me about it. That's the only way that I will know. That must have been exactly what happened in Los Angeles on one of our TriStars more than 10 years ago. As they taxied out, a flight attendant in the aft galley heard an unusual sound in the number 2 engine, which is mounted in the tail above the galley. And she said to her workmate, Marcia, does that sound right to you? And Marcia said, I don't know. I don't work this airplane very much. She said, doesn't sound right to me. I'm going to call the cockpit. She did. The captain took her seriously, got clearance off of the taxiway, sent the second officer to the back to investigate. He listened, and he couldn't tell. He said, I'm not trained to listen to the engines. I know how to operate them, but don't know what they sound like necessarily. He went back to the cockpit, reported to the captain. The captain said, well, we'd better go back to the gate. They taxied back to the gate. Mechanics came aboard, ran the engine, and determined that an engine-driven hydraulic pump was about to fail. If that had failed, once they were airborne, we may have read about that in the next day's headlines. But in dealing with it as they did, they prevented a serious problem. I encourage you to do the very same thing. Why don't you join me here? This is the first class section. We've got some extra seats. While the mechanics are changing that pump, just relax. I think you'll enjoy the last leg of your trip more. And what I'd like to leave you with is 3 ideas of things to do in order to avoid the horrors of the hierarchy. Build your great teams. Make them egalitarian. Ask for information. Ask for information. Bill Gates said, bring me the bad news. That was the way he knew how to run a successful company. So build your teams, extend that team out to whoever might be a participant. In my case, sometimes it was even a passenger on the airplane who had some information that was very important. And then make that team a cohesive unit that takes in information and makes good decisions. Enjoy the rest of your trip. Thank you.